the 2012 Bridge Cape Pioneer Trek, brought to you by Bridge. The 64 kilometres from Durris to Levain Farm on stage 4 was deceptive, short in distance but long on climbing, with the bulk of the 1900 metres confined to the isolated beauty of the Kamanasi Nature Reserve. The long early climb split the field, and soon there were just two teams out front, race leaders Evans and George and Combrick and Bell, who were in third and closing steadily on the second place pair of Bjerkes and Swanepoel. The women's race saw the continued improvement of the Klein Karoo Chicks, Speedy and de Villiers, as they took large chunks out of the lead held by the tiring Stopforth and Williamson on Bridge Bizhub. The steepest section of the day's climb had all the leading riders portaging. Once over the top, the leading four riders built a commanding lead on the chasers, and by the finish at Levain, Westphal Columbia's Bell and Combrick pulled away from the yellow jersey team to take the stage and significantly moved to within half a minute of second place at KangoMTB.com. De Villiers and Speedy won their second stage to reduce the gap to the leaders by less than 6 minutes, and Sternemann and Sonson put more time into the former mixed leaders Friedrich and Rieder. The Levain Guest Farm in the shadow of the Outeniqua Mountains played wonderful host to the Bridge Cape Pioneer Trek once again as the riders prepare for the penultimate stage of this great race. However, today has dawned very, very cold after a night of heavy overnight rain. The tracks are going to be slippery, the descent's very, very tricky indeed, lots of washouts. It's going to be a cautious field to head out over the 75 kilometres to finish in George. There was some apprehension amongst the riders as they made their way to the start chute. There were some who were lucky enough to find a warm, dry bed for the night.
We bailed out, we went to sleep at home. We live in George, so luckily my partner here has got a very friendly wife and brother that came to fetch us. So I had a nice sleep in my own bed last night.
But then you know what the weather's going to do, tell us.
It's going to be cold and wet. I watched the weather, all my golf weather channels on TV and on my cell phone for the past few days, and there's no respite. It's going to be cold and wet today and tomorrow, I'm afraid.
After a week of good weather, things were looking ominous as the start of stage 5 drew nearer. Race director Henko Radema had been out early on the planned start loop and came back with bad or good news. Henko, you've had to take some tough decisions here. Why?
Yes, we had so much rain overnight. We early this morning we went out to check the single track loop that we know in dry conditions is quite tricky. But then with the wet conditions we decided, we went through it and it took us about an hour on motorbike. And the danger is not so much a thing, we just, with the rain in the air, backmarkers would have probably walked 3 hours and hypothermia and all that could set in, and then going over the mountain still, so it's purely a safety concern. So we decided to just take the 15k loop out.
The race is on for second place here, so you're sort of strategizing, looking at the map here?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're just trying to see, obviously it's a slightly different race now. We don't have that first 15k loop, so we're pretty much going to start with the hill. Obviously, yeah, we're going to try and ride as hard as we can there and obviously try and get the gap on them there because it's the biggest hill for the day, and after that we'll just obviously hopefully 360 Live, if they go with and we're not alone, then we can work together hopefully to the finish and try and pull off another stage win as well.
Yeah, yesterday I didn't have a good day at all, me personally, and Matthijs just stuck with me and pulled me through the stage. But that's what team racing is about, so we're still here to fight, and we haven't given up any hope of anything. I don't think we take second for granted, and we'll just keep pushing as hard as we can. If we have it in the legs, it's good. If not, at least we go down fighting.
With the start loop out of the way, the day's ride would be 55 kilometres, with any moves likely to be made on the big climb up Duivelskorp, which would warm up cold legs quickly. The first glimpse of the sea might be caught between the clouds from the summit, and then the exhilarating sweep through the Sarsveld single track will have them beaming as they roll into Van Kervel High School in George. The start, delayed by an hour, saw the entire field roll under the Bedouin tent that hosted the previous evening's festivities at Louvain. This farm extends to the ridge atop Duivelskorp, and that is where the riders were heading early on. Cold legs were immediately put to the test, with the track tilting uphill inside the first kilometre. And the Westphal Columbia men, Combrink and Bell, wasted little time in attacking. Evans and George had clearly read their script and joined them. All the riders wearing high-quality wet weather gear. David George in blue, Evans in the yellow. Mindful, of course, that their body temperatures would rise during the climb, they dispensed with their long-sleeve tops. Sim and Bierkus also working up a sweat. The pass is known as the Old Voortrekker Pass and is one of the oldest in the region. Benveld Swanepoel clearly feeling the effects of a long season. Having feared extreme cold at the start, the appearance of the sun was a welcome sight for the riders as the sharp end of the race took a familiar look. Nedbank 360 Live of David George and Kevin Evans in the company of Kgabi Combrink and Nico Bell of Westphal Columbia. The race leaders are doing the early work, much to the liking of the two men from Mpumalanga, who followed their wheels in the process, moving into second place on GC as the gap back to the Kango MTB pair grew. Bierkus has been massively committed to working hard on every stage and is clearly in great form. Sim and Nico Fitzenmeyer lead the veterans category ahead of the Dutch Cube Nutswerk 1 team and were again in fine fettle up the climb. Swanepoel further back, illustrating the difficulties of working as a team when one rider is stronger than the other. Heinz Zurwerk just 21 minutes behind solo leader Timo Cooper, but there's 28 years in age difference between the two. Having ridden races all over the world, this is the Austrian's first visit to South Africa. In keeping with the nature of the sandstone rock, the descent rough and loose. George, now a formidable technician, was the man doing the trailblazing. Evans, Combrink and Bell following his lines. Consummate skills of Bierkus honed on his home tracks near Oudtshoorn, evident as he led Fitzenmeyer, Sim and further back Swanepoel and Cooper. The trail is high in the Outeniqua Mountains, and should the riders feel so inclined, they'd enjoy spectacular views in all directions. Not so this lot though. Time was crucial and speed the essence of the ride. Max Friedrich and Nadine Rieder led the mixed for 3 days. Sadly for the Germans though, Max suffering from the onset of flu, the pair had decided to take it very easy on the stage. The BH High Bike Tigers, Sterneman and Sonschen on their wheels. Further back, riders running their bikes up the rougher section of the climb, Julian van der Pleum leading the way. Neville Ackerman, one half of the Bridge Masters, having recovered from a nasty fall on stage 3, focused on retaining their second place. It was a little like the Great Trek. And Roland Williams, the exception, trying to ride all the way to the summit. Zurwerk had lost some time, now having to take some risks to haul in Timo Cooper. Oliver Minix, strangely a little sluggish down the descent. Chris Volliter chasing him hard. The Nutswerk 2 pair of 19-year-old Matthijs Eversteek and Lewald Doornbos were 5th and 6th places overall. The first recorded passage over the pass was in 1778 by Governor van Plettenberg, and it was described as one of the most difficult to cross. It was eventually realigned by that master builder Thomas Bain in 1864. Once off the pass, the leaders hit the wider roads of the Sapkal forests on the lower slopes of the mountain. Bierkus and Swanepoel coming off the mountain and about to turn onto the forest roads, with Cooper in their wake, as well as Sim and Fitzenmeyer, around 2 minutes 20 seconds back as they came off the pass. Having done their work on the climb, Evans and George sat behind Bell and Combrink as they followed the contour road. The steep drop taken at serious speed by all the top riders. Voliter and Munich, a former downhiller, and Zurich fly past. A little further back on the trail, the Fidelity Switzerland pair of Patrick Manini and Bruno Marcus negotiate a large puddle. Adrian Delaharpe and Ian Grasso and young Emily Clark behind them. The drop down the mountainside is seriously steep and brakes are tested. A false move and it's tickets. With the Southern Cape enjoying a long winter and welcome rains, water crossings were a regular occurrence. So a chance not to get the feet wet was very welcome for the riders. The Klein Karoo chicks, Speedy and de Villiers, had established a good lead over the race leaders Stopforth and Williamson. Brothers Johan and David Labuskachny just behind them. More and more at home on the mountain bike, Rodi Jaco Pereira takes the tight line on the corner. Williamson and Stopforth roll down, about 4 minutes behind Speedy and de Villiers by now. Whilst the focus is very often on the faster men and women up front, the Bridge Cape Pioneer Trek is about every single rider completing this extraordinary race. Like Andries Potgieter and Frank Hutting here. They've put in months and months of training and are here to complete it all. Well, up front, Combrink, Bell, Evans and George were putting the hammer down. The beautiful indigenous forests that stretch between George and Knysna are connected by the Seven Passes Road. It winds its way through the lush indigenous forests, another legacy of the great engineer Thomas Bain. Some of the stone bridges date back to the 1890s. High pace, these men were driving for home. Combrink and Bell seeking a second stage win, and more importantly, putting themselves in second place overall. Cube Nutzwerk 2, Eversteek and Doornbos in 5th overall. Sim and Fitzenmeyer with Timo Cooper, as well as Bierkus and Swanepoel. Heads down as they headed towards George, but they were a long way behind Combrink and Bell and Evans and George. This quartet swept through the final water point at Sarsveld, where South Africa's foresters are trained. And it has some sensational single track. A venue often for national cross-country events. These riders got to enjoy it on the Bridge Cape Pioneer Trek. Timo Cooper has escaped the quartet he was riding with and spurns a drink and sets off onto the single track. Perhaps under pressure from Heinz Zurweg in the chase group. Fitzenmeyer, Zurweg and Sim. And not far behind them, Bierkus and Swanepoel, who's enduring a really hard day. Astron cycling pair of Munich and Voliter and the Cube Nutzwerk pair thoroughly enjoying the single track. This part of the world is mountain bikers' heaven as Friedrich and Rieder fly through. Cameron Wills and Neville Cragg holding on to a top 10 spot in the overall men's category, doing a great job. The opportunity to ride through commercial forests thanks in the main to great cooperation between the mountain bike community and the foresters. Milan Speedy and Jolandi de Villiers consolidating their overall lead. Gerard Everson and Christine Janssen van Rensburg fourth in the mixed. Rene Hasselbacher and Nizam Essa. Then Jenny Stennehaag and Craig Gerber, they were third in the mixed. The former road race champion of Sweden, Jenny. After the bitterly cold start, conditions perfect as they near George, and it was Javi Combrink and Nico Bell of Columbia Westphal from Nelspruit who took their second consecutive stage win. Evans and George rolling over in second, consolidating their position as overall leaders. Timo Cooper affirming his status as one of the brightest young prospects in marathon racing in this country. He's just 21 and leads the solo category. Heinz Zordeweg following Nico Pfitzenmeier and Robert Sim over the line. Zordeweg in second place amongst the solo riders. Great support from Van Kervel High School pupils, welcoming home the mixed leaders Sterneman and Sonsen, and a great ride by De Villiers and Speedy puts them in the lead.
Yeah, I think it took us a while to warm up into this race, and we seem to be getting stronger as we go along. So we had a big time deficit to make up, but we've just kept it steady, and we've had a good few days, and it's great to be in the lead.
Barring incident or accident, Georgian Evans should put the finishing touches to a great week. The race for second is still on, though. Robert Daniel Momsen in fifth, the leading veterans. The racing is going to be red hot in the women's race. Just 54 seconds separate the top two. Friedrich and Rieder have an outside chance of regaining the leader's jersey in the mixed. In the solo category, 21-year-old Timo Cooper has 21 minutes on 49-year-old Austrian Heinz Zordeweg. Diana Carolyn is just over 8 minutes ahead of leader Desiree Loubser in the women's solo race. Despite the alterations to the stage distances, this race is a formidable challenge for all competitors, and completing the 7 days an achievement worthy of celebration. But the riders will be well advised not to let their guard down on the final stage. It begins with an 18-kilometre climb over the Montague Pass, a swing through Chandelier Game and Ostrich Farm. The 2012 Bridge Cape Pioneer Trek, brought to you by Bridge.